All right, so we will continue with the panel discussion. Thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, all the people in panel, like for being here and giving us your time. And thank you all for being here. So I will start with a question that is maybe at odds with what we are doing here. So do you think that, like, are there any examples in your opinion in which interpretability made like a concrete help, like concrete change in audio applications? So like, for instance, today in the medical talk, like, right, like we saw like a concrete application in which, like, in the context of breast cancer, Professor Rudin was saying that, like, she was able to make a difference. So like in audio, do you think we need interpretability, or what are your takes on that?
It's working, right? So I think the audio speech, anyway, web form is governed by the physics, right? We have a lot of actually the real, the useful constraint, which definitely we should use. And then, like, actually the everyone is try to use some such kind of physics, especially Gaël's the one especially mentioned it, right? I'm very sure that that is very different from the other machine learning areas. And then again, everyone mentioned that, you know, not just improve the interpretability, but also the making the model very efficient, and then making the model to be interpretable, efficient. That is quite unique compared with the text or other modalities and so on. So for us, all the kind of the application in speech, audio, we just the interpretability that has a benefit, especially for me, the more like a low computational cost side.
Yeah, I cannot say more from what you said. I think there are many ways interpretability is important and useful. The thing is that also that what Gaël presented lastly, and also which also continue work that was done in Barcelona on this listenable interpretation of audio, and this is something which is very peculiar and very specific to audio, is that in fact you can listen to the interpretation, and the interpretation is not only a visual cues on spectrogram. And I think this is also something which is direct input, even though what you can listen as an interpretation may sound a bit weird and may sound a bit too noisy. But still, I think this is also a direct impact that interpretability can bring.
I'll just add one thing that I think is important, that interpretability, you know, like tools that people are using in audio are very much similar to what Gaël talked about in DDSP. And, you know, that's the type of machine learning that like people who are working with audio are using all the time. And, you know, that doesn't exist without explainable AI. So I think, you know, it's very important to make something that people can use and be confident making decisions around. And I think there are many audio tools that are using like DDSP specifically.
I'll maybe say something a little bit controversial here, is that I think there are certain classes of tools that are much more useful than others. I think Cynthia mentioned an off-the-cuff comment that these kind of post-hoc interpretability methods, of which I've contributed to the literature, I don't find them as useful as these by design systems, right? That kind of expose these controls as a first-class citizen of the model. I think this is changing with this new wave of mechanistic interpretability, where we are getting a new class of post hoc methods. But I think a lot of the classical ones, I have yet to find a significant use case for.
Actually, yeah. If I add more, I'm also actually, one part I'm struggling with the interpretability is that makes the the compared with just combining CNN or transformer and so on, it's actually a little bit complicated. We need to actually understand the problem and so on, which good for the researchers. But at the same time, why the deep learning now becomes very popular is that it's again, for us, it's not the preferable direction, but in some sense good for the technology, which is that people don't have to know about the problem, but just playing with the neural network and so on, and then we can realize some of the kind of other functions that's already happened in speech recognition. So I'm still again, based on my kind of old history of studying many of the speech problem, language problem, we want to make more kind of a problem interpretable and then make it more the efficient and so on. But as a reality, currently, why the speech recognition, speech synthesis is so popular is that actually, as a result, without the interpretability, make the kind of the problem to be very simple neural network. So that's I'm actually frankly struggling about which one is better. But personally, I want to have a more efficient side based on the interpretability or some other constraint. Yeah.
Yeah, one more thing I would add, I guess as a response to Ethan's comment, and this is something I maybe have told other people before, is that I think interpretability is really interesting and exciting when you can, because these models are big and they're huge and, they're black boxes, as we've all said, but we should really strive to come up with something prescriptive from the interpretability, right? That we can use to make the model better or useful. And, as we saw in the morning talk about medical. And so interpretability is great, but yeah, we should always have the goal of making it prescriptive.
Controllability also is important and it goes hand in hand with interpretability, right? In applications where we want to control the model output in a certain way, right? Like mechanistic interpretability example that you gave, Ethan.
I don't think these are entangled ideas necessarily, interpretability and controllability, right? Because you can condition a giant model, right, with a feature you care about, and it will still be uninterpretable. But now at least it can follow this additional control. And so I think interpretability kind of goes a step further, right? You don't necessarily need to be able to control something to explain it or interpret it. But there is a lot of those things that you could sometimes get for free, some of these controllable aspects of it, if you're doing it in the way that you're considering those things as well.
Yeah. So I have one question about interpretable models and how far we can go with them. So for instance, in Cynthia Rudin's talk, she was saying that she was able to get better performance with interpretable models, right? But if you remember, there was a blog post by Sutton, which was called A Bitter Lesson. He was saying that after years of trying to put inductive biases like domain knowledge into the models, he came to the realization that black boxes are what we need to do. We cannot beat black boxes. What is your take on that? In the audio domain, do you think that in typical speech and audio problems, do you think we will be able to build interpretable models which will get really good state-of-the-art performance, or what is your take?
Well, I can try an answer to this very generic question. Well, in fact, I think you can build very efficient model as black box. And as soon as you want to get interpretable model, it means that you will put either constraints, either lower parameters of a small models. And in doing that, then you expect to have some gain in terms of complexity or and gains in interpretability. And so then often it leads to a decrease of performance, and then it can lead to the solution where you say, well, yeah, let's do a black box model because it works better. But it depends what you call what it works better. It works better for maybe the task you have designed for classification and so on, but maybe it has bias that you cannot interpret, you cannot control, and you cannot easily evaluate. So then if you say, okay, it has bias, if you have interpretability which can control this bias, then you can have a model which is maybe less good in terms of pure classification, but it's much better in the sense that it's interpretable and it can bring ways to control a big problem of the model. And let me give you one example. I may be wrong with the name of the model, but one of the audio gen, music gen model, I think it's audio LM, music LM, I think. And it gives a demonstration of a continuation of a prompt. And the model is trained on sonatas of Mozart and Beethoven. So then it starts to play the prompt, which is a sonata Beethoven. And then it plays music in the style of the sonata Beethoven. And then after a few seconds, it plays another sonata of Beethoven, a known one. And it was not supposed to do that. And why it does that? It's a black box, you don't know. So if you had an interpretable model, you could evaluate why, after a while, he's focusing on reproducing something he has in memory and not going away from what he has in the database to learn the system. So this could be a real gain of having interpretable model and not black box model, where it only learns from the data you feed without any constraint on how it will use the different knowledge.
I think it's also important to realize that like this bitter lesson, right? You know, we don't have enough data to solve every problem, right? Like ChatGPT, they got really lucky that there was, right? That there was a whole bunch of, text data online that they can crawl, right? Whisper, right? They were able to find all this data, right? But not every single problem is going to be able to scale like that. That one I think is a really great example is one that Gaël showed earlier today, right? This choir separation problem. If you were to throw like, train a large audio model on every single music that you could find, right? That type of separation is not going to fall out but just by prompting it magically, right? You need to have what you get by designing these things with interpretable methods, right, can make up for a lot of these deficits that we have in these big data, right? And so again, what you're essentially doing is you're injecting the system with prior knowledge about what the problem you want to solve is, and by doing so, right, you can actually arrive at a solution which might not be present just by looking at data blindly.
Mostly the covered by the Gaël and the ASM, but I just want to repeat that for speech recognition, actually we have a quite large amount of data. So I start to feel that yes, depend on the task and the speech recognition probably that we need to still care about the distribution, the biases, or some low resource scenarios and so on. But some of the primary goal of the speech recognition, I feel like the black box is actually reasonable now. However, again, this is just for the speech recognition. If we try to solve the other the problems, the story is different, right? And then recently, people also started to try to use the unified model, the single model, to solve many of the speech and the audio the problems and so on. So for this direction, the interpretability and some level of the constraint in the model is definitely important. But at the same time, at least we should have we should make a model to have a sufficient scalability. Otherwise, the model doesn't have a sufficient ability to conduct such various resolution of the speech and audio tasks. So I'm actually kind of splitting my the philosophy. If we try to kind of focus on some of the specific single tasks, I am actually more toward try to put some the constraint and hopefully want to have an interpretability. But for now, for the such kind of unified speech model, audio model direction, I actually am more interested in black box and making the model to be any scalable, like large language model is doing. Yeah.
So more towards non-interpretable.
Particular direction that first scalability is a bit more important.
Yeah, I mean, I feel the same way kind of too about like source separation, right? Like music source separation. You know, I messed with it a while, but then as soon as you heard these like deep learning models, you know, which were just trained end to end black box, it was like, wow, okay, now it kind of works. And yeah, and so I think I guess it really depends on the problem, right? If the data is there and you know, you can get the results. Black boxes. Yeah. You can't deny it.
All right, so I have a question, which is, in my mind, it's one question, but I'm going to split it into two parts. So for Gordon and Ethan, the version of the question goes, what is the right interface when it comes to interpretability for audio, at least when you have to push it out to somebody who's a consumer, right? I mean, if my parents or my kids have to use these things, what form will they take? It's not going to be, you know, maybe text form. It's not going to be splotches on a spectrogram. It has to be something else. So that's sort of the first question that I have. And then I'm going to follow up with the academic version of the question for Gaël and Shinji.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say Shinji's ASR interface maybe is at least for my parents. You know, they're pretty good at dealing with those. But yeah, I don't know. There's really, I think this came up. Maybe it was a question after Ethan's talk, but the dichotomy between, you know, the audio professional and the non-audio professional, what they want is completely different, right? And you know, in my opinion, just text to audio, if you know, my 8-year-old actually loves playing with like Riff Fusion and Suno AI. She thinks they're amazing, that she can write down lyrics and make country songs or whatever out of them. And so I think that's great for her. But yeah, I don't know. There's many people who work with audio every day and they can't do useful things out of these. Let Ethan.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm just going to expound on what Gordon said, right? I think there's different people want different things based on, you know, a myriad of factors like experience making music or what their goal is that day. And I think you can't, you know, it's good that there's so many of us in this room that are thinking about problems like this, right? Because we're going to come up with tons of different solutions to these types of problems. And all of them, I think, are going to be useful for a certain person at a certain time. I think of if you've ever been in like a professional recording studio, they don't just have one guitar there, right? They've got a dozen guitars, they've got a dozen amplifiers, they've got a dozen microphones, you know, probably more, like, you know, easily $500,000 US worth of equipment there, because whoever's going to walk in the next day is going to have something, you know, different than what they want today. And we need to build tools that are going to, you know, act the same way, right? This tool might have this knob that I really care about, and this tool might have a different knob, or maybe this tool has the same knob, but it kind of reacts differently. And I think that's important for us to make sure that we're building for as wide of a set of use cases and people as possible.
Oh, No, if you have something to say, by all means.
No, no.
Go ahead.
Okay. For me, the one important interface will be natural language description. So I was actually originally when I started the audio captioning, I thought that it's a very kind of a, for me it's a little bit indirect task because it's we know the class of the audio to some extent. Why we have to explain the redundant natural language form. But when I started to work on this area, and yeah, this has a lot of potential. I mean, first, it's definitely better for people to understand more, not for us, but for the general people to understand more. And then also having a strong connection to the current other kind of research field, especially for the large language models and so on, right? But we have some data unique properties like the audio, the conditions and so on, which we cannot, of course, get purely from the generated from text, right? So I feel like if we try to kind of make some specific format to describe the audio conditions, and then instead of like for example, instead of using the MP3 or some other header, we just try to start to describe, this audio is 16 kilohertz or something like that as a natural language and so on, as much as possible, which is yeah, definitely for some people, other than ours, are very kind of descriptive, and the same for all kind of the speech information and so on. I'm sure that there's some the period the people are more preferable to have various kind of language description about speech and the audio. So that can be a kind of the interesting interface. In addition to the current our the interface, yeah.
So now I'm going to ask the academic version. Oh, do you want to?
No, I was just going to say, what is
Great.
the academic question?
All right. All right. So the first part was about how a consumer would sort of see interpretability. The academic version is how do we present that to students? When most of us were in school, we learn how to analyze algorithms and figure out when they fail. Now it's not the algorithm that fails, it's the data set that's failing us. What do we have to teach our students to deal with that? What's missing from the curriculum that we use today to best prepare them for this kind of work?
Wow, so I don't have an answer to that. Well, I think, let's say, to give an example, so in one of the curriculum that I'm teaching, which is a master program at, it's a machine learning master. And some years ago, the students could choose completely their curriculum in this master. And after a few years, all the professor realized that the students could have the master degree, be very good in machine learning, but we've never seen the data. And then it was a major problem because it was only building a system. It's data. We don't care. It's data. We just build the machine learning system. It will work. In fact, it works. But of course, it's completely ignoring the content of the data. What is specific to the data? What can you extract as a knowledge from the data? And I think this is a major issue. And in fact, we changed the curriculum, forcing the student to take at least a few lectures which are on content, image processing, signal processing, and this type of topics within the machine learning program. And so that I don't know if it's part of the answer. And I also know that I often tell my students, did you listen to the data? And when they tell me, oh, no, but I will do it. I said, no, you should do it right now. You should learn, you should know your data to build a system which is aware of what you're analyzing. So I don't know if I answered the question, but at least partly.
I can also mention based on some of my experience. Again, I have a two-split philosophy, but for some other specific task, we should still kind of understand the problem and interpret the problems and so on. So my course, speech recognition, we still using a lot of the dynamic programming, which is also very important part to understand the speech and the text, the human language, because that's the kind of our kind of core part. And then I am still teaching HMM with some portion. And yeah, very similar to Gaël, my course first, asking a student to use the Audacity and then transcribe the switchboard. And then the student learns how kind of speech is very difficult to transcribe. Audacity or such kind of tools, how to use it. And then every time, during the courses and so on, I try to give them such kind of ways to how to debug the program. Like, for example, the learning curve. Instead of before asking me, please check the learning rate. That is my rule. Even for my kind of courses, I am actually doing that. And the same for the HMM. Before asking us the question, please check the likelihood. If your likelihood is decreased, definitely that is your fault. So now the deep neural network and some of the kind of technique that cannot be used, but still many of the kind of our interpretable techniques are important. And finally, I also usually mention like this: if you are just as a kind of one of the engineer or developer, maybe you can actually do not care about this kind of detail. But if you really want to change the world with your kind of talented skills and so on, maybe it's good idea to listen to some of our experience, because as far as I know, many of my kind of the researchers that I respect, like Paris, not only just the working on the such kind of the research problem, but all kind of skills are the kind of a very high level. So as far as I know, the all kind of talent, the successful researchers are like this. So I always try to kind of convince the student, at least selected student, to know not just for the purely machine learning, or not just for the touching the data, but for everything. Yeah.
I know this wasn't intended for me, but I want to preach to the choir just a little bit. So the most valuable thing that I've learned to debug data, and it's almost like learning to read, at least when I'm doing machine learning, is how to interpret a spectrogram, right? With audio. I mean, everyone should have to know that if they're working on audio, right? You can see so much, bugs in the data, and when you find them, that's how I found every single one,
Yeah, you give me the occasion of making a comment, because in one of my course, where I try to explain elements of phonetics and elements of time frequency representation, the ultimate part of the course is to display a spectrogram and to try to transcribe it just by viewing the spectrogram. And in part, it's one question at the exam will be that I will give a spectrogram. I will say it's a title of a very famous movie. I mean, so then I just only say find it. I just say, okay, first do a phonetic segmentation, do the phonetic hypothesis, and then find the title. And almost each time there is at least one person who finds the title, which means that it can read the spectrogram, so then it learns knowledge about the spectrogram. And I still think it's a very nice goal for the lecture.
Right. So if you have questions, please feel free. I mean, this is meant to be an interactive session. Does anyone have any questions for the audience?
Hello, thank you very much for your comments. I have a question regarding kind of the combination of interpretability with compression. Do you think, since we have very large models, but we also have seen works that show that we can achieve similar performance with much smaller networks, do you think it might be easier to interpret those smaller networks, maybe with binarized weights or just prone networks that are much smaller? Do you think we can achieve better interpretability through that?
So I would just maybe drop a first tentative answer. I think I would say no, if the compression is not constrained in a way that it should highlight specific information that you would like to have to interpret or to control. That's my first answer.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think if you're going to try to compress something, right, you're necessarily, by design, right, you're giving less space for the network to represent things, and that gives you more room to entangle a lot of different features that you might want to disentangle. And so if you're not doing it with a mind towards interpretability, then you fall ill to doing the opposite. I think DDSP is a really great example of this. These networks are really small. They train with sometimes like, half hour worth of audio. But you have this really, like, you can get all that compression because you've added a lot of structure into the system, right? And the encoder part of those networks are completely black boxes, right? But you get these decoders, quote unquote decoders, that are really highly interpretable. And so if you wanted to represent the same type of audio without DDSP, you need a much bigger network and you need much more data. And you get that for free with DDSP, so to speak.
So the answer that my experience that are similar to my answer of some of the previous question is completely depend on the task. So for example, self-supervised learning features in speech is actually sometimes even more the information in terms of the bits and so on than the original signal. However, do we really need this kind of representation? That is always a question. And then, for example, if we just discretize the self-supervised learning feature, and then we could actually have the decent performance for speech recognition or even TTS and so on. However, this kind of representation is actually quite kind of less robust to the other the speech task or audio task, especially it's speech related to the generative task. We still want to use the kind of original the rich the SSL feature and so on. So again my answer is depending on the what we want. We could definitely make the kind of a very the large the compression in the models or representation and so on. But it's depend on your kind of the task. The answer can be different. But always task specific cases, we can make a very kind of the aggressive the compression method we can find. Microphone, yes.
Okay, any questions?
Hi, my name is Jiaqi. I'm from NTU Singapore. Thank you for the very candid discussion up to this point. My question is, so with regards to representation, since we've been talking about compression, right? There is kind of a with the large SSL models, there is a distinction between acoustic and semantic in representations, right? So I've always wondered, like what represented, well, first of all, what's the difference between a feature and a representation? And also, what exactly are our models trading on in terms of representation? Because in the NLP space, you can do like the king minus man plus female, you get queen. We can't do the same thing with our audio semantic representations. So, what exactly is it that our models are doing in terms of representation?
These if to give an example of a system that's already deployed in the wild, Music LM, which is a product or like a quasi product by Google, our team, which is I think Music FX and Music FX Live. That is actually something so if you type in 3 or 4 different prompts in there, it will sum them in your representation space. That is exactly the king plus woman equals queen type of embedding space math that you get.
But is that math happening in the text space or in audio space?
It's so it's happening in this kind of joint in audio and text embedding space. I'm struggling here because I'm trying not to reveal any secret sauce that I.
All right. Let's keep prying.
I don't, to be honest, I don't think there's anything like super special that isn't published about that. But I mean, one of the things that we've discovered, I think I mentioned this to someone earlier today, is that these semantic embeddings, right? What they learn is just so cockamamie and like hard to understand and interpret. And we've tried to move away from them because of that, right? We've done a handful of, at least in the music space, we've done a handful of experiments where we're trying to like turn things on and off just to figure out what types of things are represented in there. And it's really hard to decipher. Plus, we, using like some of these semantic embeddings, which are like wave to vec 2, they're so difficult to train that, if you can find ways to solve your problem without them, I think that is the recommended path.
Any follow-up questions or any? There is one over there.
Okay, hello. I just want to ask one, maybe everyone want to know the question, the answer. So is there any standard or method which can measure the controllability and the stability of all the like LM or the neural networks? So I just want to know if maybe the research program and yes, thank you.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I often wonder, we have all this theory about stable filters and, other kind of systems with feedback, but I haven't seen it connected to LLMs yet. I don't know if.
Well, I don't have any answer either. I think evaluation is always a big problem, and especially evaluating interpretability, because an interpretation is something not that well defined. So then if you want to evaluate something which is not that well defined, it's a bit difficult. And the same for controllability. What means controllability? As mentioned by Ethan, it's you have knobs, then you can move the sound or whatever. So this is controllability, but what means good controllability? How do you compare controllability between 2 algorithms? I think it's, I know there are some work on the evaluating interpretability and explainability, but it's a very difficult problem. And I think it still remains an open question.
So I usually check the attention weight. That actually gives me gives us a lot of information if your model is transformer. By the way, yeah. That was for me actually quite a big jump. I mean, there are a lot of people discussing about why people move to transformer from LSTM. My personal preference, of course, computational cost parallelization is the kind of biggest one. But I had a lot of benefit moving from the transformer, LSTM to transformer is such kind of attention-based interpretability. It has probability-based interpretation we can have, and depending on the problem, but the mostly self-attention should be kind of a diagonal, or the cross attention should be, also should be some pattern. So my kind of the experience is that that we should check the attention weight. And again, compared with the LSTM, for me personally, after the transformer, interpretability is way more improved.
I agree with Gaël as well. Right, these terms are kind of vague by definition, right? Just because who we are as humans, right? What is it? I saw one of the definitions today was human understandable. Well, I might be able to understand something that, an 8-year-old child might not be able to understand. But I think you have to think of it as a case-by-case basis. Some results I actually didn't end up showing today when I was presenting MIDI DDSP. What we do is because we have this space where we can actually summarize a lot of these note controls, you can turn a knob and you can analyze the output again and say well, okay, so I changed this knob, so this should be really high. Is it really high, right? But that was very specific to the problem that we were doing, right? This isn't a general prescription that I can give to you, but there might be that might be applicable to certain problems. It might not be. It really comes down to what you're doing, and what you're doing is pretty broadly defined, just based on what interpretability means.
Okay, thank you. Maybe in the future we can define the which rule which can control the artificial neural networks and release our first standard maybe after this workshop. Thank you.
I would push back on that. Do we want to do that, right? Because if we define a standard, pretty quickly someone's going to find something that that is outside of our standard, but is pretty squarely something we want to control. I think it's good that we're in this ad hoc world where we can define things as they come.
Yes.
But your thinking is in the right place though, right? I think having metrics that we can pursue as a research group can sometimes be good.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to
Good comment.
Right. Maybe I can ask one. So, sorry. No, go ahead.
Okay.
Go
Yeah. Hi, my name is Karn. I'm a PhD student at Georgia Tech now. So I noticed that a lot of interpretable methods recently is revisiting old school signal processing methods, which was what I started out with as well. I guess the question would be what old school method that you think should have made a comeback but have not made a comeback yet? And that might be interesting. Let's say with source separation, I started out with ICA, but that is rarely used anymore. Yeah.
That's an excellent question. I think DDSP is a first example of old school method that came back, because it's just a harmonic model or harmonic plus noise model, and it was used a lot for the low rate coding of audio in the mid 80s and maybe even before to synthesize sounds. So what signal processing concept has not that was used in the past and is not used now? I don't know. I think it's a part of the interesting research to do. But in fact, there are many ideas in the old signal processing that can be exploited. And if you look at one of the paper I mentioned in my talk this morning, the paper by Schlesinger and al. On model-based deep learning, they propose a number of approaches where you can embed signal processing into the deep neural network. And one of the basic algorithm that they push forward quite in details is a Kalman filter. And the Kalman filter is, of course, pure signal processing base, but which can bring many come to a deep neural network because you can model things as a Kalman filter. And maybe the so-called hidden Markov models that we use for decades, and that can be, it's not really a pure signal processing based method, but because it's a machine learning method, but it's like a generative model. It's like and it can bring things because it does generate models or information in a way that it's specific, and it can bring something to deep neural network in terms of interpretable deep neural network.
My experience, yeah, every time I actually that try to kind of update my the lecture materials, and yeah, this is not the answer, but just a kind of example I wanted to let you know that the one time I actually skipped k-means. And then the later, the Hubert, the deep cluster, this kind of method came out. And then many of my students actually they cannot implement the k-means. So now I decided to actually include the k-means in my the course. Another is, yes, the Kalman filter or some other the equations. I particularly found that some people are not very strong at some the random signal analysis, statistical the signal processing. Why I found is that the diffusion model. It's they're based on the beautiful the Gaussian mass. So which some people might not directly solve it, but definitely many people here are solving the similar the equations by the integral the Gaussian and marginalize it, and then variance gradually kind of the making it larger. And so on, right? So that if we have using a Gaussian, we can have such kind of a solution. However, some of my the students actually don't solve this equation, and then they just try to ad hocly changing the sum of the updated equation of the diffusion, and then mention to me that I propose a new method and so on. And then that's if it is correct, still fine. But I found that he actually mentioned to me that but my case sometimes variance becomes negative. So I set some threshold to make it always positive. Wait, if we exactly solving the diffusion process, the variance must not be negative, right? So yeah, then I found that that we need such kind of a training and so on. And then as Gordon mentioned, the diffusion process would be now the one of the most promising the generative AI method. So again, it's not a direct answer. But given this experience, that I try to also start to kind of at least teaching some basic random signal the analysis or the statistical inference and so on.
Yeah, I'll just say I really love like old school filter design, poles and zeros and stuff. And we have a paper, combining that kind of stuff with neural fields where it makes a lot of sense, right? Because you have modes in a room, and so I think that stuff it's never going to go away, I hope. But
yeah, I'll also add to I think that this last talk that talked about NMF, right? It's fallen a little bit out of flavor, but I love seeing that stuff that we're revitalizing things that have fallen out of flavor. A really nice example of this is of reviving old techniques is if you read the SoundStream paper, there's a paragraph in there where they talk about, I can't remember if it's like which part, it's either in the intro or in the related work, where they're like, hey, we went and we like looked through a whole bunch of old quantization techniques just to see which ones worked. Because before then, you know, there was a string of papers leading up to that doing this kind of audio codec learning. And they kind of worked. And then there was this big, you know, this big 0 to 1 step when SoundStream came out. And the secret sauce is this residual vector quantization, which was this paper that had, you know, had been in the literature since the 80s or something like that. And no one really thought to connect those dots. But they explicitly say in the paper, hey, we're scanning through the literature and trying to find something that might work. And it's, you know, existed dormant for 30 some odd years, 40 years.
All right. So, yeah.
Yeah, thanks for your opinions. I just had a general question, as in like, so this is like, how would y'all as researchers, like say there is something you wanted to work on that is a personal liking of yours, like as Gordon said, he likes filters. So something that you really like versus something that the field, some direction that the field is going in general towards. Like now we've seen what LLMs have done to, you have a paper every 3 days. So how do you like draw an intersection between these two? Like, do you choose to ignore, like you can ignore like what the field is doing and do what you want, but there's very little likelihood of you going on to do something in that case. So how do you, where do you draw, what are the trade-offs you'll consider, and what are the decision processes that y'all undertake? So just curious to know that.
Well, I don't know if it will be controversial or not, but if you look at the past, for example, in the, well, I'm an old guy, so I did my PhD in the early 90s. And at that time, the neural network were going down and everybody was saying, oh, it's working very badly. You should do hidden Markov models. And if you were doing neural network, I even have one of my friend who was hired in a lab, and the head of the lab, who was, I would not say the name, but he's a famous guy, hires this person, but forbid the person to do any neural network because it was not just very bad work. And then for 20 years, doing neural network was not very good. So during this period, if you were a neural network researcher, what will be your way of working? You say, okay, I want to do neural networks. This is my stuff. I like it, and that's it. Yes, you like it, you do it, but you know you're not in the mainstream of research. So then, if you are, I mean, so then it's a price to pay. Sometimes you will stay under the shadow, and nobody will know you, and your research will be just in a dead hand. For neural networks, we know that it was not a dead end, and then the guys who go on neural networks liking this way became the mainstream. So I think it's always this trade-off, is that you have a trade-off of, should I do exactly the mainstream? Everybody's doing that, I should do that, and that's it. Or should I follow my ideas? And so, of course, if you do only one of these things, you lose something. So I think the nice way is that to be aware of the mainstream, to be aware, or to have your ideas and to have what you like, and try to exploit these two paths, which are not that orthogonal.
I'm the most junior up here, so I have the least amount of experience to answer this question, and yet I will persist. My feeling is that, you know, like Gaël said, trying to be influenced by what the hot thing is and the new things, but knowing that this is a fashion cycle, right? Where, you know, just like clothes change, right? You know, neural networks are the thing right now, but in 10 or 15, 20 years, right, there might be some hyper, you know, thing or whatever that exists that works really well. What I think is important is to have problems that you care about, right? And if you care more about problems and care more about, you know, I like to think about people actually using the things that I work towards, and that's never going to go out of fashion. Solving problems is not going to go out of fashion. Finding useful and novel solutions to something is not going to go out of fashion. And every time something new comes along, you know, now I have a set of pet problems that I care about. I think about, well, how can these things be applied towards my problem? Or what knowledge do these things impart into me as I'm trying to solve my problem? And how can I put my spin on that? So these are the things that I think about. The other thing I think about too is when you have a problem that you care about, if you frame it in the right way, even if no one else is doing this, if you frame your solution in the right way, I think that can drive its reason for existence, right? And that's why I think when I work with students to put together presentations or papers or something like that, the first thing and the most important thing to worry about is the introduction, right? Yes, designing experiments, yes, designing the methods, also important. But if we cannot justify what we're doing to anyone, then why are we doing it?
First, I agree with both you guys, and if I have some other aspect to the give you some comments or advice would be that our life is long. Now there's still 80 years in average. Yeah, we can continue to work on it. So of course some period we may need to focus on it, but for me. In the year or even 10-year scale, the working on several the things are also fine, which might not get a kind of a quick, rapid result and so on, but we can live in the until 80 or 85, right? By the way, why I have this kind of the first paper, when first kind of the technical paper I did when I was a student is that one of the physician Hans Bethe, his the paper he actually wrote it when he was over 80. And then that is actually very famous the paper in this area. And then I found that we can at least until over the 80 we can write the paper. So our life is long.
I know, right? I think this is a good place to finish the day. Right? Thank you everyone for being here. Let's thank the panelists. And if we continue this, and if you want to, take part in the organization, please let us know. We will try to have everything on YouTube. And if you have any questions, anything, contact us. You know where to find us, I guess. Thank you very much. Enjoy ICASP.